Good morning again, everybody. It's my pleasure to call this annual general meeting to order. As we always do, we start off in a good way with an opening blessing and a welcome from Halus, and we are so delighted to be on the unceded territory of the Musqueam Nation.
It's an honor for me to be here representing my people, representing my ancestors, being the voice for them. As most of us know, when we get ready to do a welcome, we do it as a community. So that's why it's such an honor for me to stand before you representing my people, my elders. On behalf of the Musqueam people, we really welcome you here. Also, thank you for the wonderful work that you're doing for the communities that you're representing, making sure that your voice is being heard for the people out there that sometimes don't want to listen, don't want stuff being brought forward. Thank you for having that strength. Thank you having that strong mind, that strong heart, being there for your people as well. On behalf of the people, once again, share a welcome song to welcome you here, not only to our community center, but to the unceded territory of the Musqueam people and our village of Musqueam. Really can't thank you enough on behalf of the people for always being there, representing your communities, your nations, your family, your elders, and your ancestors. So with that, I'll share this welcome song to welcome you here. Haitzap Kasiyam Nisya, Haitz Kasiyam. welcome you here to our community center, our village of Kumaskuyum. And, you know, honestly can't thank you enough on behalf of your people, all the First Nations people throughout BC. Thank you for the wonderful hard work that you're doing for your people. Enjoy your time here.
Thank you once again, Haichkasiam, and we raise our hands to you for opening, and we look forward to seeing more of you at lunchtime. And speaking about lunchtime, let's turn to our agenda. You have a proposed agenda in front of you. In that agenda, we're starting off by getting an update from the BC Assembly First Nations Board of Directors. Also, the Governance Committee that was struck from the last meeting. We will also hear from, and just a note that it has been indicated that unfortunately our BC Assembly First Nations Youth Rep, Johnny Hanous, is not able to be with us today, but he has provided a written report that is part of the annual report. That's part of your kits, so you can catch up with the good work that he's been doing there. We do also have our elder Gwen Point joining us. So I know my understanding is it will just be Elder Gwen Point will be joining us. We'll be getting a run through of the annual report as well as the annual organizational report. So we'll first hear from the Chief of Staff, Melanie Debasage. I did it again, Melanie Debaski. And then the financial audit report and going on to the Native Indian Brotherhood Trust Fund. At lunchtime, we're very fortunate again that we'll be calling upon Alec Dan and the Wolf Pack for a cultural performance about about 12:30. And that will lead us into the honoring of the former BCAFN board director, Liz Logan. So that'll be right after lunch. We will be hearing today, and she will be taking questions today, and that will be the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, Honourable Minister Carolyn Bennett. Right after a proposed health break, we'll be hearing from Chief Commissioner Marilyn Bowler of the National Inquiry into Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls. And at that time as well, right after following her, we'll be doing resolutions. Right now we have about 12, and we will be getting them to you just as soon as possible. Please note there is a cutoff for any late resolutions. That would be noon today. What we also propose is right after we adjourn for the day here, we're going to get into, there's a number of positions open for vote, and that would be the female youth representative. We have 2 candidates. We have 6 candidates for the board of directors, and we have 2 candidates for the office of regional chief. So we'll be calling on each of them to share so that you can get a better idea what they're focusing on and how they propose to serve the BC Assembly of First Nations. Moving on to day 2, again, similar setup to this morning. We're going to be starting off at 8:30. We're very fortunate to be being able to call upon Alec Dan again. We'll be hearing about the BC Assembly's First Nations Sustainable Economic Development and Fiscal Relations Strategy, Indigenous Languages Initiative that's been rolling out across Canada. The first regional session was here in British Columbia. Updated children and families, emergency management, and just a note, it is our understanding that Minister Katrine Conroy from the Ministry of Children and Family Development will be attending around that time to observe, and around lunchtime we'll be looking for some one-on-ones. So emergency management at 10:15 to 11, and then update on fisheries. We'll be hearing from our Federal Minister of Justice, Attorney General of Canada, Honourable Jody Raybell-Wilson, and lunch. If you're wondering why in that first bit after the polls open, at 8 a.m. and close at 10, if you're looking through the morning and saying where is the time for reporting back and acknowledging the elected, various elected members from the board directors to youth rep and regional chief, as soon as that information is available, we will basically open the agenda and bring them forward, because we understand that it is pertinent to everybody here to get that information as soon as possible. So just please note that we have created a little wiggle room into this, understand that we'll be certainly putting that in there, and it is a top priority. But because we don't know how long it's going to take, We'll just wait for the signal from our elections officer, who is Marcus Hadley, who was the successful proponent to handle all of these elections this year, and we thank him for stepping up. So then we go from lunch after hearing from Honourable Jody Wilson-Raybould. We'll go for lunch, and then climate change and environment, homelessness, housing strategy. We're hearing updates from the Technology Council and the Aboriginal Justice Council and New Relationship Trust. So that is what has been proposed to you. We do understand that day 3 there is also the National Fiscal Relations Dialogue, and that's a separate agenda that will be proposed for you to actually be a separate chair. And I'd just like to acknowledge that will be Leah George Wilson, who'll be handling day 3 on Friday, October 13th. So this is the agenda as proposed. Any discussion needed on this? Any proposed changes? May I look for a mover on this proposed agenda for this annual general meeting? So I'm looking for a mover for this proposed agenda. Thank you. And proxy for? Thank you. And we're looking for a seconder. Just for the record, please.
Thank you.
Microphone 7, please. 7.
Okay, thank you. Chief Susan Miller, Catesy.
Thank you. Any need for any further discussion on this agenda? Seeing none, is there any opposition to this proposed agenda? Okay, thank you. So we'll move forward with this. Thank you very much. So moving forward, it's my delight and pleasure to call upon our BC Assembly First Nations Board of Directors, Chief Susan Miller, Chief Rebecca David, and I know that you may have seen the news this morning. I don't know if Chief Marilyn Slett is here, but she was busy about the 1-year anniversary about the tugboat diesel spill. So she did indicate she wouldn't be a few minutes late. So I believe she's still tied up with that. So I'm happy and delighted to turn this over to our board members.
Where do you want us?
Where would you like to? Do you want to do it from here, or do you want it from there? Probably here's better.
So for me, go first?
Unless you want me to.
I can go first.
I'll be very short.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? A little bit distant. I'd like to start by acknowledging the territory of Musqueam. Thank you for inviting us into your home again. On behalf of the Board of Directors, our report is going to be fairly small because you see there's only 2 of us right now. In the last year, we've undergone tremendous change at the Assembly. Everybody has been a part of that. Between our remaining members, myself, Rebecca, and Chief Maureen Chapman, we have conducted business as usual, I believe, for the Assembly. I have been part of many governance boards. I have represented the Assembly at the national level. I have helped to chair very many meetings around economic development. It's been a challenging time, and I'm looking forward to end of day tomorrow, because it's all going to be an exciting time moving forward. And, you know, I'd like to really thank the board for the direction that they've provided. To me individually, it's been a privilege to be able to have been on the board with James Delorme and Chief Liz Logan, and with Rebecca Maureen. I think that we have learned a lot of things, and you'll see over the next 2 days a lot of the work that you have guided us to do coming to life. So I'm very excited about that time, but I will be reporting again in a few more minutes, so I'm going to let Rebecca talk.
Good morning, everyone. Chief Rebecca David of Pocochin. It's been an honor to be a part of the board and witnessing a lot of the work that has been taking place with the staff, the transformation that the BCAFN has been going through, and restructuring our governance for the mandate that was given for us. And everything that we've been working on, it's been Very eye-opening. I got appointed and I sit on the National Indian Brotherhood, but that too I'll be presenting a little bit later. But just as a lot of the work has been moving forward, it's really, again, the work on behalf of the people, and it's an honor to serve each and every one of the chiefs of BC. And so as we continue to move forward, it's very exciting. We have the elections coming up, and we have new board members that are going to be coming in. So I just really want to reiterate, the motion that we're in, we're taking a strong stance in moving forward, and a lot of the initiatives that you guys have given us the mandate to move forward, a lot of that will be basically discussed in this next couple of days. But I just want to keep it short because I know we're going to be also on time again, coming back up to speak about the National Indian Brotherhood. So I just want to thank everyone for coming this morning. Hi, Chika.
You can just, Susan, you can just stay. Sure, thank you. Thank you very much to both our board members and all our board members, past and current, who are present with us today. And we lift our hands to you for serving and taking time away from your community and family to serve in a regional capacity. And I just realized I was so busy moving forward, I forgot to say, wait. Hello, everybody. My name is Russell Coy. I'm delighted to serve as your chair and serve you. My family hails from both Shamaquam, of the Statliam Nation, as well as Canoe Creek of the Northern Shwetmuk Nation, and I'm delighted to serve yet again as a chair, and however I can help you, please let me know. Moving on to the next item on our agenda, I'd like to call forward, and also as they're coming forward, thank them, those who stepped forward to be part of the governance committee. We have Chief Susan Miller, we have Cookby Ryan Dave, if you could please come forward. We have Tribal Chair Tyrone McNeil, again, if you could please come forward and join Chief Susan Miller here. And we also have Chief Byron Lewis and former Tribal Chair Ken Watts. So if you could each come forward, that would be fantastic. And I'm going to also call upon Hannah McDonald, who will be presenting the hard work and the fruit of many good discussions that have taken place around this governance committee that was struck in March. So I'll call you forward, Hannah.
All right, so here I am again. I just wanted to take this opportunity to introduce Hannah McDonald, who has been helping us go through the recommendations and some of the revisions that are needed under our Constitution and bylaws. Back in March of 2017, the Chiefs and Assembly directed the BC Assembly Board of Directors to take a look at some of the changes that are needed as we move forward. There's also changes to the Society Act, so it was a very good time for all of that to happen. And this report is simply to give us the information on how we're going to move forward. And at our next annual general meeting, we will be asking for a vote to take place to implement all of the changes that are needed to bring us into a 21st century document. So with that, I will pass it over to Hannah. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Susan, and thank you for having me here. It's an honor to be here today, and thank you to the Musqueam for hosting on its traditional territory. I'm an associate at Ratcliffe & Company. It's an Aboriginal law firm in North Vancouver. Some of you might remember me from the Special Chiefs Assembly in March. At that meeting, the Chiefs and Assembly passed a resolution striking a governance committee, and the mandate of that committee was to review and make recommendations on BCAFN's various policy manuals, in particular the governance manual as well as the Constitution and bylaws. So that review was primarily intended to address a number of gaps and deficiencies that were identified in those documents, partially as a result of the former regional chief's resignation. Am I still, can you hear me? Heard something go out. So that included how to address vacancies in that office, but also a number of other issues and concerns that were raised by the Chiefs and Assembly at that meeting, such as political accountability concerns. Another major purpose of the governance committee that was struck was to ensure the BCAFN's governance documents were in compliance legally with the new Societies Act and the regulations and requirements that go along with that act. So since the March Special Chiefs Assembly, the committee has had several meetings, and we've turned many drafts and put in many, many hours in working towards fulfilling the committee's mandate, which for the most part has now been completed. However, during the course of its reviews, the committee uncovered a number of additional issues that were fairly complicated, and the committee deemed that needed to be addressed in order to provide a comprehensive set of recommendations to membership today. Given the amount of changes, sorry, I'm having trouble with my belly. Getting no, it's okay. It's used to it. Given there's a lot of changes made, so given the amount of changes that the committee is going to be recommending, we are not going to take you through each issue and change, as there's just too much information, I think, for members, and not enough time today. Instead, the committee put together a summary of the more significant changes, and that summary is attached to the memo, which is from the committee to membership, and it's included in your materials, as well as clean copies of the recommended revised governance documents, which may later be subject to some additional changes going forward. Tab 2, apparently. The governance issues canvassed by the committee are fairly complicated, and before the recommended changes can be finalized, the committee wants to get some further input from membership. Therefore, the committee is proposing to engage membership to review and approve the various changes that the committee is recommending to the governance documents, and is going to request a resolution be passed extending the committee's mandate beyond this AGM, including appointing new committee members where necessary, with the goal of ratifying and approving the revised governance documents at the spring AGM in July, or I guess that would be a summer AGM. The committee also recommends a review of the other BCAFN policy manuals. Although the committee originally did have a mandate that called for the review of all of the BCAFN policy manuals, once the committee got into it, it realized that it didn't have the time, the capacity, or the expertise to do that, which turned out to be a major task, and therefore it stuck to focusing on the primary governance documents. As well, on the memo at tab 2, on page 5, there's some other additional governance reform questions that the committee hopes membership will consider going forward as part of this final stage of review. So we talked last night with the board about how to best present all of these changes, and we decided that the summary that I just gave would be sufficient for today. But at this point, we're going to open it up to questions and comments from chiefs, for myself, or to the committee more broadly, unless I've missed something that... Tyrone? Well, thank you. So, with that being said,
so there was an understanding that the information that is in front of you today just got provided to you today, so to give you an opportunity to look at that. But we do have all of the committee members here, so whatever may be your question, they're happy to step forward and provide some insight about how and where they got to where they got. So again, it was under tab 2. In that, you will find an introduction background to where we got to, an overview of revision, points of clarification, aspects specifically as was raised by Hannah, and then the questions for further consideration on that page number 5, and then the actual revisions in a table behind. So I just want to make sure that you see that and that you're aware of that, and it will certainly guide you. You do see the committee members here, so if you feel more comfortable, approach them one-on-one. Again, we invite you to do that, but we certainly open the floor at this time for any questions you may have. It looks like we're good. So once more, I'd like to just check in to see within our committee members if you have any additional comments you'd like to make. Sure. Microphone number 6, please.
Kobe Ryan Day, Bonaparte Indian Band. Just a quick comment. I didn't want us to seem vague or like we're just working and doing whatever. If you do look at the revisions, it was mostly an academic exercise. There wasn't any really extreme changes, but there were little changes to lots of things. So you'll see in there that we touched on, you know, almost the majority of the provisions, but they're minor changes. So just didn't want to sound too vague, but it is kind of vague because there were, like I say, there were little changes to lots of things. So, Cookstrom.
Thank you. Again, microphone number 6, please.
CMLCIA, Kachiais, Lactal Sweet, Stalo Chilsa, Sitham, Homaskium, Cheltromos, Rekasuida, Haha, Tamak Loyal. Good morning, Chiefs and Delegates. Tyrone McNeil, Tribal Chief, Vice President of Stalo Tribal Council. Just some broader things that we got to in this exercise. A lot of the conversation, in my view, centered around balancing your ability and authority to elect a single regional chief to an office, with this being a provincial society that has a 5-member board. And it's about empowering chiefs in assembly equally, if not more, than the authority the Societies Act gives a board. So making sure your decision-making is entrenched in the governance, both the bylaws and the governance manual, ensuring that there's provisions for the board to manage day-to-day operations, which I think is a fair intention of the board, and ensuring that the regional chief is accountable to and supported by the board between chiefs' assemblies, but more importantly, everybody's accountable back to you as chiefs in assembly. So it has been a little bit of a balancing act, finding a way within a society's act, constitution and bylaws that describes that in a meaningful and relevant way. Once we got into the governance manual, that's all ours to build. So it was easier and cleaner to build those authorities and those accountabilities into the governance manual. And I'd encourage you to look at both documents, one after another, read through the constitution and bylaws, and then pick up the governance manual, because they are linked. We purposely tried to make the bylaws a little bit skinny, referencing the governance manual wherever we could, because it's easier to amend the governance manual than it is the constitution and bylaws. And we didn't necessarily want to put in a formative way our typical decision-making processes into a constitution and bylaws, where it's better reflected in a governance manual that we've built and we've amended and presenting to you. And this is quite an arduous process. There's not too many keeners out there around this type of work. Appreciating working with my colleagues to present with you what you have in front of you today, but also wanting to afford you time to take a look at what it is we presented to you, get some feedback to us. And although we're proposing to ratify all the changes basically a year from now, we want to conclude our work well in advance of that. So by mid-June, end of June 2018, we can circulate our final version for your consideration leading up to a ratification vote at the AGM in 2018.
Microphone number 4, please.
Thank you very much for those comments. I just want to add to that. Obviously, my hope is that there are enough keeners to read the documents, but presuming that there might not be, I would encourage you, if you're going to take a stab at that, to review and read the memo that we've provided first, because it does provide some context to the changes that were made. It does summarize the more significant ones, so if it's kind of an onerous task to get through all of it, I think the memo does provide a very good summary of that and the background context that you're going to need. I just wanted to...
Thank you very much. Microphone number 4 again, please.
Tu Uklama Wamish. Good morning, everybody. My name is Wamish. My English name is Ken Watts, former Vice President of the New Toronto Tribal Council and member of the committee here. Thanks to the Musqueam people for allowing us here on their beautiful territory to do this important work. Just really quickly, again, in follow-up to Chief Day and his comment, just not saying we're just trying to pass along the work here, but it's important to note some of the direction from the previous Special Chiefs Assembly was focused around the regional chief and the election of the regional chief, but also filling in the vacancy when the regional chief resigns. And a lot of that work has been entrenched, and we've spent a lot of time, trust me, looking over the same document over and over, probably 10 versions later. It's a lot of work, and I just want to acknowledge the staff and Hannah for the great work that that I think we've been able to come forward with. But I guess my important note here is why we need to engage chiefs further. Is that a simple conversation that Tyrone and Eve and I had this morning around the election of regional chief, whether that should be 50% plus one or a threshold of 60%. That's even something we necessarily don't agree on, but it's important to engage the rest of the chiefs on what they see how they see that election rolling out. This is your regional chief that you're going to be electing, and it's important that they have the solid foundation to work upon through the Constitution and bylaws and the governance manual. But I guess when you look through the revisions that are on there now, I think it's important to note that what we realized in our work is that when you change one thing in one part of the document, that it ultimately affects other parts of the document. So we've had to look at board of directors, we've had to look at all the other types of issues that are throughout the document. But I just, again, wanted to acknowledge the whole committee and everybody's time working on this work. It's taken a lot of work, time and effort, but I appreciate it, and I've enjoyed being a part of this work. Choo.
Microphone number 15, please.
Quietep, Cookby Judy Wilson, Nisconnet proxy. Good morning, and thank you for the welcome song and the prayer this morning, and thank you for all the delegates being here today. And the agenda is pretty jam-packed, but I think it is important about the governance, because every regional chief that was elected, I asked them directly, who are you accountable to? And I've always had mixed responses, one saying the board, one saying the BC chiefs, a variety of questions. So I think it's really important to have that accountability piece that's clear to our regional chief and to us as the chiefs in assembly. And I think there has to be, because there's also two parts, it's actually tiered. One part is to the members, and one part is to the national chief, to the AFN, who has all of its other separate rules and regulations, I guess if you want to call them, governance. So I think in revising this, I think it does have to be clear on the governance, whether it's a governance flow chart. There is one line saying if there is a question of the accountability, say AFN is going a different direction than us, and that's actually happened a few times where the AFN had gone off in a different direction. And in the BC, we have to have a clear mandate and a clear path and mandate to our regional chief at those tables. So I just wanted to make sure that that section was more clear, and also that I did like the idea of the chiefs in assembly rather than just members, because we are from our respective communities, and we do have responsibilities to our members and to our communities. The other part I wanted to speak on was to the Leadership Council, because there's a question there. I am part of the Leadership Council, but also I was also part of the All Chiefs Task Force that set out the accountability framework for the First Nations Leadership Council. So there is a question there, how does it link? How do you reflect that in the governance, and how does it work? And the other example I wanted to use also is when the chiefs came up with those 4 principles. How are those being embedded? And once you have a clear mandate like that, given from the chiefs, how is that going to be implemented? So I think there's a few questions there, and it's good we have till June of next year. And it's good that we can have this discussion in our communities on what the BCAFN is to us, and how do we make decisions when we come together, because we have our other respective organizations as well. So I think that was a timely question in the governance questions there.
Thank you. Looking to see if there's any responses here. Or any further questions? Oh, yep. Microphone number, is it 9 closest to you? Yes, 9, please.
Good Morning. Depending on which side of my card you're looking at, I'm either Chief Brenda Wallace or I'm a proxy, Doug Kelly. Ryan's calling me Brenda this morning. I didn't know why. It wasn't until after somebody pointed it out to me. Good morning, everybody. I appreciate the work that you've done. Have some comments and questions. I'm not sure which is going to come out of me first. When I looked at the text, page 987, removal and/or resignation of regional chief is now to be carried out by a process involving complaints filed with the board, followed by a conduct review committee. So I looked quickly, I couldn't find any reference to a conduct review committee. And so that's one of the questions I have is, where does this come from? And I think that it's probably better to remove the board from any of that at all and go straight to a conduct review committee. That would be my suggestion. For optics and all kinds of other things, I think that's important to consider. Bless you. I love Nikki, she knows that. So I turn to number 4. You know what always strikes me as odd? We elect a regional chief for a 3-year term. And then we can't say you work for 3 years. Which is it? Do you have a 3-year term, or do you have a 2-year term and 9 months? Or like, let's be clear about what it is. We elect the regional chief to do a job. They should do the job until the term is over. And if they're going to run again, then hopefully they've been campaigning from the day you elected them. And so it's a no-brainer to re-elect that regional chief. Right? That's the ideal. I don't know why we would start goofing around with that system. It's worked for us for years. So I think we need to be explicit. You have the job for a fixed term. There certainly is a campaign period near the end of that term. They continue to serve in that role. I don't see the need to change that. I don't see the need to ask for someone else to take on the job when they've had it for 2 years, 9 months, 2 years, 10 months, whatever it is. So I just wanted to offer those comments to contribute to the discussion. The only other one I wondered about, and it comes up in the work that I do, is that we're moving towards nation to nation. And when we talk about nation to nation, some are moving away from Indian Act elections. Some are moving to returning to, restoring traditional forms of governance. And so I'm wondering what thought has been given to our bylaws to reflecting that. When a nation makes those kinds of changes, are we creating the space to recognize leadership that might not be coming from Indian Act elections? So I just wanted to offer those comments. Thank you, Marcel.
Thank you. Microphone 4, please. And,
Thanks, Brenda. The committee was actually supposed to respond to questions, but I will take those, and those are really useful comments. With respect to your first comment on the Conduct Review Committee, it is an 8.7, starting at 8.7 in the bylaws and Constitution, but whether to take the board out of that process entirely was something that the committee did consider and discuss at length. And if you look at the actual language of the bylaws and Constitution, you'll see that the way that we distinguished it was a standard of, I think, egregious conduct. So anything over a certain threshold, if the complaint was over a certain threshold, that would automatically go to the Conduct Review Committee. But more minor complaints would be dealt with by the board, and that was done as a result of with the intention of not bogging down a Conduct Review Committee with minor complaints about administrative processes and that kind of thing. So we did consider that, and it's a good comment. So if you get a chance to look at that provision specifically in there, see if that addresses your concerns. But thank you for that. With respect to your second comment, yeah, that's relating to the questions for further reform that we've put into the memo, and that was something, as far as the regional chief stepping down from his role during a campaign period, was something that we talked about for an even longer period of time. And as I was mentioning in my comments earlier, there's a lot of complicated issues that were raised, and that was a big one, and that's why we have put it to membership to get some further input from members on what the preference is there. We went back and forth on that particular issue numerous times. So we have flagged that as something to get further input from membership on. One more thing, with respect to your third comment, again, something that the committee talked about a lot, and you will see mostly in definitions, the governance documents taking into account alternative or different forms of governance systems. And one of the ones that I've got a note in the memo about chiefs versus members, and that was one of the changes that we really struggled with whether or not was appropriate. But given that so many First Nations now don't have an Indian Act system of governance or necessarily a chief, that was one of the reasons that we use the term members rather than chiefs in assembly in every instance. But there are some other ones, and they're set out in the memo as well.
Microphone number 6, please.
Thanks, Hannah, for reminding us we're supposed to do part of the responding as well. You did good in the first two, Hannah. On the nation-to-nation piece, Cheam, we're not there yet. We did have some discussion at committee, but we need more input from nations to drive the force. So that kind of balanced with, we're taking an existing constitution and bylaws and governance manual and then amending it to higher standards that fit today's reality. So our focus was more on amending what was already there than a long-term fix. I would suggest as communities and tribes and nations develop what that nation governance is, at that time we'll take a look at it and okay, if it's not 30 individual communities, it's one nation represented by this government, that'll have to be incorporated into the bylaws and governance manual to properly reflect it. We're just not there yet.
Microphone number 18, please.
Thank you. Charles Marvin, the elected chief councillor from the Niska village of Gitwin-Sith. Now, just going or reading over a little bit about your when a resignation or when you have to make the decision if the regional chief steps out of bounds or things like that. I think one of the things that would be better to have is a code of conduct that each of the regional chief and the board have to follow, and that will set your guidelines as to what to do. You could have regulations with that. In our nation, we have a code of conduct that we all have to follow. And then we have, if anyone breaches the code, we have a striking committee that selects 3 individuals from our whole governing body, not just the chiefs, but also the elected. And they have to make sure that nobody is in conflict with that committee. And so everything is done fair. And then there's a review done in regards to the violation of the breach. And we decide as a committee, whoever's on the committee, on 3 things: whether we're going to remove that person from office, or we're going to keep them on, or we're going to reprimand them. Those are the 3 choices that we have. But you know, and the recommendations go to the whole body of elected officials, and at the end of the day, they're the ones that make that decision. It's not the committee that does it. It's the elected people that make that decision in the end based on the recommendations. And I think that might be a more fair way to do that. And I like the recommendation in regards to 60%, because that gives the person that's running for that position for regional chief a huge mandate to do their job. And not only will hold them accountable, but it holds the electorate accountable as well, because we chose that person. We gave them a 60% mandate. We have to stand behind them. We have to be accountable to them as well. It's not just them to us, we're accountable to them. And it also makes us make the really informed decision based on the abilities of the candidate, not just because we know them, not just because they're related, they come from our region. It's because they gave the best campaign, or they were the ones that did the best to get the vote. So I think I like the 60%, and I'm hoping that the Assembly goes that way. In regards to the members, because of the Societies Act, is that why you're having that discussion about members and chiefs in the Assembly? If you wanted to define that, members would be the chiefs in the Assembly of the BCAFN, I think it would make it simple. So that's all I had to say, and I thank you for your report and for the work that you have done, and because it's a lot of work to do, and I applaud your efforts, so thank you.
Microphone 6, please.
Thanks for those comments. Working backwards, Charles, on the members versus chiefs, I think that just from my experience, that's kind of the personal view legal counsel brings. Society speaks to members, so let's put members in there, and we're promoting chiefs in assembly continually, so it's a little bit back and forth there. Personal preference, I think. Our personal preference is recognizing chiefs in assembly, but in that, knowing that some of you don't have chiefs, you have other titles and whatnot. So making some kind of flexibility that better recognizes how we govern ourselves. On the one of the things the committee and staff struggled on was we concentrated on the Constitution, bylaws, and governance manual, but directly related to those are other policies, such as the Code of Conduct, which relates to what you mentioned, Charles, around how you conduct yourself, conflict of interest guidelines, HR manual, finance manual, executive limitations, anti-harassment policy, and they'll all be related to these governance documents, but we didn't want to overload you with too much information. We thought if we'd come to some understanding with respect to the bylaws and Constitution and how we propose to govern this Assembly, then if we're going in the right direction there, we can hear from you, to fine-tune it a little bit, and then spend a little bit more time on those supporting documents that are important, related, and relevant to how we govern ourselves, particularly how we conduct ourselves in governing ourselves. So there is a lot more here, just that we didn't want to give you too much information all at once.
Microphone number 4, please.
I just wanted to add to that, the conduct review process that you're describing as preferable, I think is really close to what we have in there. We don't have the conduct review process applying to every elected position necessarily, it's just for the regional chief. But as far as the conduct review committee taking referrals and making recommendations that may but may not include a removal of the regional chief, that's exactly what we have in there. So I think what we put in there is very much in line with what you're recommending.
Any further question or comments? Floor remains open. We encourage you to participate. Microphone 4, please.
Just in closing, I just wanted to say, in terms of the roles and responsibilities, Tyrone's always been a great advocate ensuring that the regional chief and the wording that we use throughout is that they're accountable to you, especially by resolution, and they have a responsibility to carry through with those resolutions and reporting out back to you as chiefs as well on what's happened. I've heard that, numerous times that, what's happened with resolutions, where they go, not necessarily here, but even in our own communities, people want to know what happened and what the follow-up was, and, hopefully we addressed that in the work. But the other part I think is really important to note that I realized, and we spoke about this at great length, was about the role of board of directors. I would be surprised on how many of you know exactly what the role of our current board of directors do within our organization. I think there's been a misunderstanding or miscommunication in the past, or just not taking in enough information. And remember the discussion at the last Special Chiefs Assembly when there was a, kind of a concern about what role the board took on or didn't take on. But it was really a misunderstanding about actually what their role is within the organization and the roles and responsibilities that they have to look after the society itself. And I think we've really tried to address that in this work as well. I think again, I don't think everybody's been absolutely aware of what it is the board actually is supposed to be taking care of. And I hopefully we've addressed that in these revisions. So I encourage you to take a look at the drafts. I know it's a lot of work, it's a lot of reading, but it's important. And again, it helps good governance and set the foundation for the next regional chief and the elections thereafter, and the board and other elected positions. So, go.
Okay, we have another question. Okay. Microphone 24, please. Microphone number 24, please.
Chief Mike Archie from Canamlake, and I want to say thank you to Musqueam for hosting us here today, and delegates. Good morning for the good discussions, this morning on governance. I was first elected way back, I guess, coming in 2007, and I'm Mike and regional chief. And at that time, we were going through some elections, and I wanted to. Back then, I was looking at the three governing bodies, which is the all chiefs meeting, the BCAFN, and then we have our First Nation Summit table, and then we have our independent bands. And my question to the candidates at that time was to look at the governance system and look at the accountability of how the governance structure works, and our regional chiefs, political executive to the national chief, and how does the regional chief get that mandate to carry it to the national chief? And that there's some things there that we really need to tighten up on. And I guess with the last event where our regional chief had stepped down, and in the eyes of the public as a governing body on First Nations people, I have an obligation to look after the interest of my community and bring that voice forward, and you have those channels to go through. But the question about the board, what role is the board to the regional chief, and our each and every one of our mandates here at this table is to support our regional chief to get the work done for us, and we need to tighten up and make sure that we're a team, because when we start dealing with BC and Canada, that we have all our ducks in a row. But I'm just glad that this discussion's going on. I look forward to the end of it, and the 60% is okay, but what the 50 plus 1 is. 50 plus 1 looks more at accountability, right? Each chief, that when it comes time to vote, we should have those chiefs at this table. That's a mandate that you have a responsibility to your nation, to your people, to come out and vote. 60% doesn't quite make everybody come out and vote. Thank you.
Microphone 9, please.
I hadn't intended on speaking twice. but Ken raised resolutions. And that struck a chord for me. I think we need to revisit resolutions. I know if we go to the National Assembly, I'd be really curious how many thousands of resolutions have my name on it as a mover or a seconder. 30 some odd years of attending those meetings, and I've put my name on a lot of them. Add the three together, I've attended Summit, I've attended Union, I've attended BCAFN, there's probably an equal number there. And I'm not sure that's the best way to get business done. We also create, you mentioned that the regional chiefs are responsible for carrying out direction in those resolutions. What do you do when they contradict one another? You don't have to go very far back in our history where we've got one resolution saying, let's do this, and then 6 months later you have another resolution saying, no, let's do this. We should never be passing a resolution that contradicts something. We should be sorting it out and deciding what our position is, what our view is. We should be never attacking the work of another organization. We should always be supporting other organizations. Yet we do attack resolutions all the time. So I'm hopeful. Thank you for raising that, Ken. I think the committee needs to take on that question of the resolutions process. What should it be? I think if a community needs a support resolution, I don't think we actually need that. The regional chief should have the authority to sign a support letter, but be explicit about under what conditions that a regional chief could sign a support letter. I would be more interested in seeing a plan being approved, and that regional chief be held accountable for the work set out in a plan. I think that's more relevant, and I think it's more fair, and I think it gives us an opportunity to assess progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 6, please.
I'm just trying to respond to those comments. Around Cookby Mike, around the regional chief's relation to the AFN. There's no doubt we're somewhat a product of that National Assembly, but if you look at the Constitution and bylaws, or sorry, the governance manual on Part 8.8, we're starting to describe that. First and foremost, the regional chief is accounted to the BC Assembly of First Nations. And if there is a conflict with respect to national processes, there's a process there identified on how to address that. So we've had those conversations to try to describe in a meaningful way the appropriate relation and communications where those relations go sideways. We did have a little bit of discussion around the resolution making process, but we just never got to it. We might want to put together a policy around resolutions that reflect support and those other things that the Grand Chief raised, but that'd be formed like an appendices to the governance manual and be an explicit process around resolution making. If there's no other questions or comments, Russell, I was going to leave it this way. In our spring assembly in Kamloops, you gave us a shelf life that ends here in this session. We presented to you the best of our ability, although we had a number of meetings, we still had limited time because we're all busy doing everything else that we're doing. We're presenting to you what we've come up with in that time frame. My personal view is a lot of it's good work, absolutely open to tweaking and suggestions, absolutely. But given we're going into election mode right now, we're not quite finished this work. We need more conversations with you to get this right so it can go to ratification. So there'll be a resolution coming to you at the end of the day asking for an extension of the mandate of the committee and perhaps repopulating the committee because there is a lot more work to be done. And we need to find the time and space to do it in such a way that when it's presented to you a year from now, you're well prepared to accept it and move on. Keeping in mind we're trying to balance how we govern ourselves, how we direct ourselves, how we direct the regional chief with being a provincial society that has a board. It's necessary to find space for the board in the bylaws and governance manual, but it's got to be the appropriate space. And I think we've done a pretty good job in doing that, but really interested in hearing back from you how you interpret what it is we're presenting here, and just continue advancing it till we get it right, knowing that it'll never be written in concrete, but let's get it close enough that we can go to a resolution that makes major revisions to the bylaws, existing bylaws and constitution, and existing governance manual. Because until you change it, the old still applies. And for the most part, the old version empowers the board, that 5-member board, more than you as chiefs in assembly. So we need time and space. At the same time, there's some urgency to get this finished and you endorse what that product is, because it changes the whole governance of the BC Assembly of First Nations hopefully in a positive and productive way. HKCM.
Microphone 6, please.
Make a couple closing comments as well. I don't say it now, I won't. This whole exercise, it's kind of like when we're in our communities working under the Indian Act, we're trying to shift the pieces around to make something fit that's just inherently not going to fit. So like Tyrone said, we did the best we could, given that we're under the Societies Act, and we have this momentum of resolutions in each of our organizations, and I'm glad you opened that can of worms, Grand Chief, because it does need to be addressed. How we govern, I mean, we are just moving the pieces around here with what this committee work is doing, and it was good work and it was good exercise, but it's also a little bit deflating as well in my mind. I volunteered to be on this committee because I thought, well, maybe we'll be able to make something different or do something more dramatic, but quickly we were mired in documents and trying to move things around. So what is the way forward? What is the ideal governance mechanism? Because in my view of things, and I'm speaking as a community chief now, is that these organizations and the way we run them, they're crutches. They're crutches that keep us from doing the hard work of getting our nations back together and dealing with each other as nations. And I know Tyrone said we're a little ways off, but how are we going to get there if we continue to go as individual bands to these organizations for advocacy rather than our nations coming together and having that strength? And then maybe the regional chief's office is a coordinating body of those nations to move forward. And thank you, Cookby Judy, about bringing up the relationship with the national AFN, because that is a real concern when things move forward based on the numbered treaty nations across Canada, when we are very distinctly different in the way we do things west of the Rockies. And those are discussions that need to be had. I'm sure they've been had in the past before I was a chief, but we need to dust those off and do it again. And maybe we're at a different time now where the province and feds are starting to talk nation to nation, that we really need to envision what that is and how we're going to make those steps forward and create, because we're not really in a process of creation here. We're in a process of trying to resuscitate or get something working better when it's already not designed to work properly in the first place. Cookstrom.
Thank you. Before we go to Chief Byron, microphone number 18, please.
Good morning. Chief Wilf Adam from Lake Babine. I just need some clarification here. Are we in the discussion of the directors, or are we talking about some changes to the bylaws, or not sure where the hell we are. Because I'm just following the agenda. You know, we're on the governance committee, and all of a sudden we're talking about resolutions. So, just a point of order. Where the heck are we?
All right. Well, microphone 6 is live and happening.
There, thank you. Byron Lewis, Chief of the Okanagan Band. I think, you know, I do agree with a lot of what I heard, especially on the resolutions, but I think, you know, resolutions are, you know, basically, you know, how we basically conduct business. And I think one of the things that's missing is how they're actually followed upon, because we can actually pass as many resolutions as we have, but if we don't have a process of how they're actually dealt with, they're just going to pile up. And I brought this up, and just to give you an example, is we went and elected, our community elected 6 new councillors in our last term. And a month previous, before, we had about 26 directives and a number of resolutions. In the month of April, we jumped to 102. You know, so, you know, that type of thing is something that's not important of what's actually, you know, the resolutions are an important function, but it's the follow-up we got to look at as how we're going to be processing them and going through and at least trying to get resolutions on there. And if we're guilty as anything in First Nations is our follow-up, you know, we have court cases that are all we win and we never follow up on them. Resolutions sometimes are fall in the same boat. And, you know, I agree with a lot of things that have been said. And one of the things I will say is that we're using the right document that's in front of us for where we are today. And what I mean by that is that, you know, we still have a lot of work to go as nations. And as we get to that point of being nations, and perhaps you are going to see a change of what we have as a regional chief is no longer being a regional chief, but basically as an ambassador or, you know, some type of position like that is, you know, to where they're actually carrying the words of the nation, but they don't negotiate on behalf of the nations. But we're not there yet. So I think this is you know, the model that we use until we actually get to the point to where we conduct ourselves as nations. Then we'll actually develop the model that requires that, but I don't really feel that we're at that point today. So, you know, I'm quite satisfied, and you know, with you know, I was only able to do this on the corner of my desk, but you know, I support everything that's been actually said, and some of the and all the recommendations that have been made by by my colleagues that are sitting on this board, and you know, I'd like to really commend them for their work because it's been a hard task. But again, I say it's, you know, we work with what we have. Thank you.
And just for clarity, that would be a committee, for this governance committee. Microphone number 5, please.
Just around the question or concern around the resolutions, just a respectful reminder to Chiefs and Assembly that you tasked our committee to review the governance of the BC Assembly of First Nations. Due primarily to time pressures, we focused on the Constitution and bylaws and the governance manual. Both of those documents reference and describe the roles, accountabilities, and whatnot for the regional chief, for the board, and for Chiefs and Assembly. So those are 3 significant parts of how this assembly is governed, particularly around the provincial society piece. So there are a number of other documents that support those key ones, the bylaws and the governance manual, that we simply didn't have time to get to. And the comments I heard this morning around resolutions, if you think about it, the resolutions process is one of the most poignant points of governance, is that decision making. So I'm sure it'll be a rich and deep conversation, but in my view, it's more about describing in a formative way the resolution making and deciding processes. It may not necessarily determining what resolutions in terms of themes or categories or anything like that. It's more about processes. And in my view, again, that's a significant aspect of governance.
Microphone 4, please.
Thanks, and just to try help wrap up the conversation here, if you'll be getting a copy of the resolutions, I think at lunch is what I heard from the staff, and they'll be passed later this afternoon. Again, extending the work, but also we've talked about having a one-day session with chiefs just to go through this. I said resolutions once, and there was a conversation that blew up. I talked about 50% plus 1, 60, and we could spend a whole day just talking about those two items amongst themselves. So again, looking for your support on extending the work and maybe appointing new members, but just to try to wrap up the conversation here, just seeing the need to carry on this conversation in a much broader topic and actually walking through, I think with the document projected up there and people having copies of them and actually going through it so you can see the gaps that we've hoped to try to fill, but also the need to have more than an hour agenda item to discuss such a large topic such as this. Hopefully we can have a one-day session, all chief session, to discuss these constitutional bylaws and governance manual better. So once again, klako, chu.
So thank you very much to each of our governance committee members for stepping forward, and also to Hannah for providing her expertise. So please assist me in providing some gratitude to them. Thank you very much to each of you, and at this time it's my pleasure to call upon both of our BCAFN elders representatives, Dr. Gwen Point and Chief Bobby Joseph, to come and provide some remarks. And just an FYI, I did mention earlier that there is the youth representatives are included in the annual report, and there is some words from Johnny Hanous, the male representative. And we do certainly thank and recognize Kalila George Wilson for her service as we're getting ready to move into elections of the female youth rep. So please help me in welcoming our two elders.
Te talitl, mukwat, siam te siaya, silawatha, te talitl. Shaishkawita, homo te squi, halkamilm called homo te stalo, te talitl tetzel ias. I just want to say, Elatith, good morning to our chiefs, to our leaders, to the elders that are here, to our friends, and to acknowledge the staff that work very hard. I've witnessed that firsthand, the ATIS, the very good work that they do so that you can do your good work. I really believe that what we do, what we're doing, ATIS is good work. I really believe we're doing what we're supposed to be doing as well. And I've been privileged to be here to witness that firsthand. I've witnessed the work done at this table and at the national table. And I really can say that it's my privilege to witness and to walk with you. What came to my mind this morning, and I think about the territory we're in, our families, the Musqueam people, and the stories that I grew up with, they were the warriors that protected the rest of us that lived inland, from Langley, what's known as the Fraser Valley, Stalo territory. These were the first group of people that protected us. And my grandmother told me to pay homage to the Musqueam. She also said, pay homage to the Sumath people. And I grew up with those stories. So it's really special to be here. And this is my husband's family as well, the Point family. but it also brings to mind the dear elders from here that taught us about our ceremonies. I think about the dear elders, the Stogan brothers, Uncle Vincent and Uncle Walker. They're both directly connected to our families in the valley as well. I think about our dear elder, Dominic Point, who traveled up and taught our families about the canoes and taught our men how to build canoes again. So it's really, I believe, special to be here. A lot of our teachers and elders from this area gave freely of themselves. And I'm really grateful to be here. But I also think about, when I think about the elders and the teachers, I think about the questions they asked of us. And they'd always ask, why are you here? Why are you here? They'd always ask you, what is your intention? And they weren't afraid to ask, what's your intention? And of course, we had to be able to answer those questions. And at the end of the day, it really wasn't about what you were doing, but about how you were doing it. That your intention was good. And all I know, as one elder told me, don't make it anything more than what it is. But don't make it anything less either. And I've witnessed the challenges at the table, and I witnessed the ATIS, the very good work too. And I really appreciate the good work, even in the face of challenges. And I thought that this session with the governance committee, I thought it was timely. I thought it was a good way to start this session off. Because we can't move forward until we totally understand one another, until we know what's on the table, until we can dialogue and be heard. And of course, that's the first lesson that the elders teach us, is to listen. But my grandmother told me, don't just listen here, rather listen here and here. Because I think far too often we listen here. But true listening and true dialogue, when you listen here and here. But I know I can say with confidence that I've always been proud, one, to be Chomach, one, to be Stalo. And I can say that I've always bragged a little bit as well, because I know I've seen the good work. I've been part of the good work from the ground up, certainly in my territory in Stalo Nation. And I'd say we were the movers and the shakers in education. I've worked with leadership. I've seen the work, the tireless work. I totally don't know how you really do it. I feel sorry for myself, just being away the little time I'm away. So I thank each and every one of you for your ATIs, for your very good work. And I know that prayers were said this morning. And I ask that each one of you accept those prayers for yourself. And I tell this to young people because I've witnessed so much difficulties for our young people today. It's like walking up a hill backwards because of the discrimination and racism we face every day. The challenges our young people face are twice as more difficult. But I always tell them, cut yourself a break. Cut yourself a break and look at what's been accomplished. Sometimes we look at all the challenges and that weighs us down. I think at some point, look at the work that's been done. And I see it in the packages. I see the good work in the packages. So my message to each one of you is one, is to be good to yourself. Two, know that you're appreciated. And cut yourself a break because, we're not always going to get it right. We're not going to be free of mistakes. But that we learn from it is what's important. And that's what I witnessed even this morning with the governance committee. Trying to create a common ground so that every one of these initiatives that you're working on, whether it's in your community or at this table or at the national table, receives the attention. But you're shining a light. You are the light for our people. And I thank you for your good work. And I'm just honored to walk with you. To eat Dalitzel Tetzel ATI is Haitchep.
Gila Kesdal Nathmute, greetings all my relatives. It's always good to see all of you together. And of course, I want to acknowledge the Musqueam for allowing us to use their great house and to be on their unceded territories. I was thinking very deeply in the last day or so about this gathering. And I thought about all of the time that I've witnessed people like yourselves, brilliant, courageous, working so hard for our people at home. And I couldn't help but think about what it is that we do when we hit low water marks. We've hit lots of low water marks that I've seen in my time. And there will be more low water marks. And I think it's important for me to mention it at this time because we're in a time, an opportunity of reconciliation. How will we respond to those low water marks? I, in some ways, have seen some of it this summer in the past few months, different reactions to the LNG at the Prince Rupert Lac-Oualam's territory, the Site C Dam, the Kinder Morgan issue. And always, when governments respond the way they've always responded, typically, it really hurts, breaks my heart. But if that's what it is for me, imagine what it is for our people at home, the people that you represent. What does it do for them? And so when we hit those low water marks, like we did yesterday up in the North Island area among the Kwakwaka'wakw, they've been busy for the last 40 days occupying these fish farms and wanting to rid them out of our territory, and then to have the Prime Minister and his Premier and his entourage go to our big house, and we get the same song. That really hurts. And throughout the course of the summer, young people, mostly young women, strong young women in their 20s, doing the occupying of those sites. And there was so much hope and inspiration and cause to think that things could be different now in this time of reconciliation. And there was so much expectation, and I could have almost word for word told my people who were in that big house exactly what was said. That at the end of the day, the highest consideration by government was the bottom line, jobs and wealth. And so I can imagine how they're feeling this morning. I imagine some of you have felt those things in your lives before when we come to these low water marks. But what impresses me more than anything is that you get up the next day when the sun rises and you go back to work and you keep on sustaining the struggle that will eventually bring freedom and joy and balance into our lives, into our families and our communities. And I just wanted to say that because I want you to always be what you have been, always strong, always resilient, always courageous in this time of reconciliation. I want to just mention why I feel so strongly about reconciliation. It comes from my very own life experience where I grew up and became a young man who was totally broken and became addicted to alcoholism and was violent. And I saw no way out. I found no peace. I found no hope. I found no inspiration in my life. But eventually I did, and I thought to myself, well, if this can happen to somebody like me, it could happen for many of us. And we might even have an opportunity to reconcile with the rest of Canada. So don't give up on that, because I think that if we can find more Canadians who agree with us, who stand with us, who desire the same things for their children and that they desire for our children, eventually that we're going to get there. It won't be the politicians in isolation making the political decisions they always make because they're driven by corporate interests or other interests. So don't give up on reconciliation. We are going to have other low water marks. But when we get there, when we get to the numbers, the critical mass of Canadians who care about us and who want to be on the same journey with us in creating a society that's equal and just, that's where we want to work ourselves to. So I just think that all of the work that you've done through all these years has benefited us, has brought us to where we are. And every phase, every step is guided by some new additional insight or perspective that brings us closer to the road of freedom, like self-government, like having back our own territories. So never think that you're not effective. You have been very effective. And I've seen it for a long time now, 45 years, I imagine, almost 50. I remember when I first left North Island, I became a community development worker, and we had this powerful man, George Manuel, who I had never heard the tone of his voice, of his message that all of you now carry, that we have to become independent and autonomous and free, and we have our will and we have our ways, and we have to bring that forward so that we can progress. That's the other thing I really want to say. I know that modern day education is really important, but we really have to continue to emphasize and bring forward our own worldview, our own principles, our own values, so that we can continue to grow as nations of people in this country. So don't give up on reconciliation. The old ones, and everything they did through the ceremony and the protocol and all of the things that they did, their responsibility was to reconcile. Before these newcomers even came to our country, our jobs were to reconcile. So don't give up on reconciliation. Even if we did nothing else but learn how to reconcile internally, we will have moved the building blocks hugely. And it's really important to recognize that. I wanted to spend a moment just asking you to think about elders, we elders here in this wonderful organization that provides hope and promise for us. What do you think our roles are? Why are we here? It's important to ask that. Because if we can answer that here, we can ask those same questions about the elders at home. They're a profound resource, and we're not using them to the fullest extent that we can. I think for me, as I grew older, and I'm old now, I had a transition, literally, from wanting to be like all of you, brilliant and smart and leading in the front line and being engaged, to being someone who knows when to let go and to say, my role is different now. My role is to provide some degree of a moral, spiritual compass that asks all of you who are active leaders to act out your highest selves. I think that's what our role is. And not to be engaged in decision-making, but maybe to help build out some ideas on how we inspire the elders at home, wherever we live, to become engaged. So I think it's really important in this time especially to think about that, because the way forward is not going to be easy. It's not going to be short. We're going to need sustaining inspiration from generations of knowledge before us to carry us forward along with the new knowledge that all of you hold and possess. So hold on to your resilience, hold on to your courage, hold on to your visions about who you are, where you live, wherever home is. Because we are all proud nations. We all have our perspectives. And it's not wrong to be different around this table. The only time it would be wrong was if you never surrendered to the higher collective good of all of us. That's what organizations do. You're asked to make some kind of sacrifice. You're asked to make some kind of surrender to make a very diverse collective group work in unison. And that's what you're struggling with. That's what I heard this morning. And I'm so proud of all the comments I've made, because that's been the consideration, the overriding good of all of us. Because here's one thing I learned for sure throughout all of the time that I've been involved and seen others involved, is this, that we're stronger together. That when we find the ability to overcome our diversity and difference, and we find the common ground, we're really strong. So I'm just going to close by thanking all of you for all of your work. Stay strong. Be open-minded, be accountable, care, be considerate, be loving. This country is now watching us. We're going to lead this country. We're going to lead the process of reconciliation like nobody else has, and nobody else can really, because it is we who Canada wants to reconcile with. And so I want to say thank you for all your work, and I continue to be amazed and impressed at your resilience and brilliance. And I know that at home, people are watching us, so we keep doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Raise our hands to both of our beautiful elders for everything that they do here and so many other places. You know, they say, call upon your elders. And we know that these two do so much work in so many, and they hold beautiful space in so many other places as well. And we lift our hands to each of them for all their good and hard work and how they lead in their roles as knowledge keepers. There wasn't a break built in here, so I'm just going to call up our next presenter, which will be the Chief of Staff of the BC Assembly of First Nations, to provide her update, and then we're going to take a short break before we get back on to the regular schedule things. You're probably looking at the bottom of your coffee cup, wishing for one, so thank you so much, Melanie, and turn it over to you.
Good morning. Manokship. Ani, Melanie Dijnakaz, Chiging Donjaba, Makwadodem. That translates as good morning. My name is Melanie DeBosque. I'm from Chiging First Nation, and I'm Bear Clan. First and foremost, I want to thank the Musqueam people for allowing us to do this important work here this week and in their territory. Also, I want to thank all of the attendees here today for attending BCAFN's 2017 Annual General Assembly, and I am delighted to report out to you on the fiscal period from April 2016 to March 2017. So, I'm very proud to report to you, as the Chief of Staff, on the organizational annual report for this fiscal period. Our office underwent another significant transition over the past fiscal year. Notwithstanding these changes, the BCAFN board and staff continue to work towards implementing our organizational goals. Significant progress has been made over this past year, and I'm confident this will only continue. On behalf of myself, the BCAFN staff, and the Board of Directors, I thank you for your continued support. The BCAFN is committed to supporting First Nations in advancing community-driven, nation-based approaches that are made in accordance with each nation's customs, laws, and traditions to address their own specific challenges and meet their unique opportunities. Despite these challenges associated with the leave of absence, then the resignation of the former regional chief, and following the motion of the chief supporting an acting regional chief, the BCAFN Board of Directors and staff have remained steadfast in their commitment and work for the Chiefs of British Columbia and the BCAFN organization. We are committed to the implementation of the Sustainable Economic Development Strategy and have been working very hard to secure funding partners and funding resources to complete this work. We are working with the provincial and federal government on various files. In addition, we're working on another number of other files ranging from the commitment document with the First Nations Leadership Council, an action plan for children and families, and our fiscal relations file. A more in-depth update can be found in our annual report, which was handed out at our registration table. It focuses a lot on more in depth into our national policy work and our regional policy work. Through a principled approach, the organization will move forward by focusing on the foundation that First Nations can improve their communities by working together, creating consensus on priorities and action, and building on their own strength. This annual report provides a summation of what the organization has accomplished the past fiscal year of 2016-2017, and we've made this report available to you. Some of the activities contained in the report include an update on our Sustainable Economic Development Strategy, an update on the MOU signed with BC and the BCAFN Board of Directors, an update on our champions table, which we'll hear from some of our champions later on our agenda. Also, our online resource center, which you can kind of see a bit of it through our community profiles that are posted on our website, but also it's going to turn into an online web application which will host our black books and our business resource tools. In addition, on our policy report, we have been doing quite a bit of work in regards to justice and economic development. Our policy team is just completing work on the submission that we're preparing to submit to the Working Group of Ministers. Also, just to give you an update on the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls portfolio, after the resignation of the regional chief, we transferred this to, well, the AFN executive transferred this file to the Women's Council, so that file now sits with the AFN Women's Council. In addition, the BCAFN is proud to announce that the Chiefs Committee on Economic Development, led by the British Columbia Assembly of First Nations, restarted their relationship and had their first meeting with I guess the last meeting was 3 years ago that the AFN had, so BCAFN led that this past fiscal. In addition, we have our provincial policy work related to the tripartite working group, which I mentioned on the children and families, and our continued work with the First Nations Leadership Council. In terms of long-term planning, BCAFN will continue to provide capacity, support, and innovation to drive our mandate to respond to resolutions as identified by the Chiefs in Assembly, and to implement and support the vision of the regional chief. The BCAFN administration will continue to seek additional funding opportunities to increase organizational capacity and to assist in delivering resources related to sustainable economic development and all of our other files identified. We will continue to maintain positive relations with the organizations we work with, and we will successfully implement all of the work that has been identified in the organizational strategy. In regards to the corporate and financial reporting, in the annual report, you will find the pro forma financial statements for the organization. It's in Appendix A of the annual report. And on behalf of the BCAFN Board of Directors and staff, I would like to say that we are proud to report we do not carry an organizational deficit, but we are carrying a surplus this fiscal. And measures to obtain additional funding and reduce expenses and raise funds through charity events have been undertaken to ensure that the organization continues on this path. So in summary, I'd like to say thank you and miigwech, and let me know if you have any questions. In regards to the financial report, our auditor will be coming in shortly after the break, and he will be happy, along with our finance manager, to answer any questions in regard to the finances. Miigwech.
Yeah.
Please join me in thanking our Chief of Staff, Millie Dabaski, as well as her entire team for the hard work that they do on your behalf. And pardon me, I work with somebody else with the same last name, and she pronounced it very differently, so I'm still reminding myself, so pardon Dabaski. We're going to take a short break. It was not built in there. It's just a short recess. We're going to reconvene at 10:45, at which time we'll hear about the BCAFN audit report, followed by the National Indian Brotherhood Trust Fund update, and then lunch, where we will have Alec Dan and the Wolfpack providing a cultural presentation. Don't forget, just out the doors, there's a lovely trade show with all sorts of information and beautiful things to purchase, so we invite you to take a look at that, and we'll be reconvening at 10:45. Thank you.